Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the headlines this hour. The United States of America has launched strikes on Iran for the fourth consecutive day. CENTCOM says the strikes aim to degrade Iran's capability to attack commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has stated that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until the United States ends its acts of aggression. Tehran has also claimed to have struck US targets in Jordan, Kuwait and Bahrain. US President Donald Trump says he will authorize strikes on bridges and power infrastructure as well as energy sites in Iran next week unless Tehran agrees to negotiate with Washington. Kuwait's military has stated that it is intercepting Iranian attack drones, while Bahrain has activated air raid sirens after the United States carried out more strikes against Iran. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi has stated that the US decision to resume its naval blockade destroys the agreement that pauses the conflict for peace talks. Tehran has accused Washington of undermining the Memorandum of Understanding. The Iranian army has stated that it has launched a new wave of drone strikes in the US Azraq Air Base in Jordan. Tehran claims the attack targeted F-18 fighter jets and military hangars. US President Donald Trump hosts Iraqi Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi at the White House. Both leaders pledged to expand economic cooperation and boost Iraq's oil production. Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the headlines this hour. The US has launched strikes on Iran for the fourth day in a row. CENTCOM says the strikes aim to degrade Iran's capability to attack commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC says the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed till US ends its aggression. Tehran also claims to have struck targets in Jordan, Kuwait and Bahrain. US President Donald Trump says he will authorize strikes on Iran's bridges, power infrastructure and energy sites next week unless Tehran agrees to negotiate with Washington. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi says the US decision to resume its naval blockade destroys the agreement that pauses the conflict for peace talks. Several Iran-linked vessels transited the Strait of Hormuz ahead of the US naval blockade. Shipping data shows most of the traffic was linked to Iran oil and gas export. US Senate Democrats block a $1.15 trillion defense policy bill, accusing President Trump of launching the Iran war without congressional authorization. The US Treasury freezes more than $130 million in Iran-linked crypto wallets under new sanctions. Washington says it's targeting Tehran's illicit financial network. ICE has suspended 4 vehicle stops for immigration enforcement after 2 fatal shootings in Texas and Maine have triggered massive protests and scrutiny. Well, viewers, those are the headlines in our top focus. US President Donald Trump has reportedly chaired a high-level Situation Room meeting to discuss a major expansion of US military operations against Iran. Now, according to Axios, the meeting focused on plans for a massive offensive that would go far beyond the current strikes targeting Iranian military positions around the Strait of Hormuz. The meeting was attended by Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, Secretary of State of the U.S., Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Kane, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, White House Envoy Steve Witkoff, and other national security officials. Now, the White House has declined to comment on the reported discussions. This comes as U.S. forces carried out a fourth consecutive day of strikes against Iranian air defense systems, radar installations, anti-ship missile sites and drone launch positions. Washington says the objective is to weaken Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, Iran has continued retaliatory missile and drone attacks against U.S. military bases in Jordan, Kuwait and Bahrain. The United States has also enforced a naval blockade on Iranian ports. Interesting developments coming in. Of course, President Trump has warned that the military campaign would intensify in the coming days and has said that Iran would hit hard over the next 3 days and claimed that future generations could target the country's power plants and bridges unless Tehran agrees to negotiate over its nuclear program. Trump has also stated that the United States is closely monitoring activity at Pickaxe Mountain, which is a deeply buried site believed by U.S. and Israeli officials to have potential links to Iran's nuclear program. He's warned that if any suspicious activity is detected, the site could become a military target. He's added that U.S. negotiators had conveyed a final message to Tehran urging Iranian leaders to return to the negotiating table, warning that failure to do so would face even greater military action. With us on the broadcast is Professor A.K. Pasha, former Director of Gulf Studies Program at Jawaharlal Nehru University, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us. So it's been a rather interesting couple of days with a lot of high-octane developments in the Middle East. The situation has escalated rather rapidly. So far, we have seen U.S. strikes on Iran be quite calibrated in the sense that they have largely targeted military installations as such. But now there are statements coming in from Donald Trump, fresh rhetoric that he is likely to also target power stations, the energy infrastructure at large, bridges as well, mostly civilian infrastructure in Iran. He's stated that he will conduct these strikes next week as a warning. In the meantime, there's a report that has come in that yes, there are plans for a massive offensive that would go beyond current strikes targeting Iranian military positions around the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think this rhetoric by Donald Trump, this tough talk that he's been making, these reports that are coming out, there's some weight behind this, and is Trump likely to protract his the strikes, the military operation that is being conducted by the United States?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, the U.S. has the capability. It has the Air Force and fighter jets in the vicinity, both in the GCC states where it has huge bases, and also from the aircraft carriers, and also from Jordan and beyond in Europe, where the fighter jets can fly from NATO countries and then bomb and go back. You see, the initial attacks last week were mostly on the areas near Strait of Hormuz, but now they extend beyond Hormuz area to central, western and northern parts of Iran, and have included increasingly civilian infrastructure, whether it is bridges or railways, etc. So the range of targets, mostly they include what Benjamin Netanyahu had mentioned, that is about 35 targets which he said he could not bomb when both the countries started their bombing campaign on 28 February and achieved about 15,000 American bombing campaigns and 10,000 by Israel. But these large-scale bombings did not compel Iran's surrender or suing for peace. Iran also retaliated, hitting at American bases, not only in the GCC states, but also in Jordan and in Israel and beyond. So this action-reaction has been going on, and Iran has warned that if they kill Iranian infrastructure, Iran also would bomb the civilian infrastructure in the GCC states along with the military bases. So there is this fear of escalation, and this would impact a large number of Indians and other immigrants who are working in the GCC states. And if Iran were to cripple the desalination plants, power plants, along with the oil and energy infrastructure in these electricity and other infrastructure, life would become unbearable in the GCC states where the heat is around 50 degrees Celsius. Very difficult to sustain if there is no water, electricity, or other sources, even solar, if it is hit. So there is this likelihood of escalation gradually of a bombing campaign by both the countries, and this will only cripple and make things difficult and harden their position. For all practical purposes, they had agreed for a ceasefire and signed the MOU, but America, which had least interest initially after 28th February bombing on Hormuz, now has relegated the nuclear issue and Iran's missiles and axis of resistance to the background and taken up only the Strait of Hormuz issue, mainly because of Israeli pressure and also because of the pressure from GCC states who feel that if Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, it might strangulate these GCC states by preventing oil and gas and other exports and imports from the Arab Gulf states. So under pressure or inducement from these Gulf countries, America has taken up. But unfortunately, none of the other allies of America are supporting, whether it is NATO allies or Australia or New Zealand or any other. So America is alone virtually in this campaign, and it will be known very soon that oil prices again have started rising globally, especially in the United States, which may hurt President Trump and cause inflation and tumble in the Wall Street stock market, and also reduce his already down popularity ahead of the November elections. So it will be a very difficult gamble.
Absolutely, sir. I'll come back to you on some of the points that you've made. I request you to stay on with us as we are tracking some further updates. Fresh updates coming in. The IRGC has threatened to block additional strategic sea routes after the United States reimposed a naval blockade on Iranian ports. Now, the IRGC has stated that regional energy exports would be shared by all or denied to all, raising the possibility of disruptions beyond the Strait of Hormuz. Analysts say that Iran could rely on its Houthi allies in Yemen to target the el-mandeb Strait, a critical shipping lane linking the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. Now, the waterway itself is vital for global trade and Saudi oil exports, and any disruption could have a major impact on energy supplies and shipping. This threat comes as US forces continue strikes on Iranian military targets, while US President Donald Trump has warned that Iran's energy infrastructure could be targeted next if Tehran refuses to return to negotiations. Oil prices have already climbed to their highest levels in more than a month, reflecting growing concerns over the security of global energy supply routes. Stay with us on the broadcast is Professor A.K. Pasha. Sir, of course, you were referring to the oil prices, and I remember just about a month back when Donald Trump put out his Truth Social post that yes, there'll be a ceasefire, yes, there'll be a memorandum of understanding. The reaction across the globe from the markets was very positive. All the markets went straight to the green, they all boomed, and the oil prices came down significantly. And now, over the last couple of days, we've seen a complete 180. The fact that the markets were in the red, the oil prices have now ballooned again. How far do you think this particular situation will persist? Iran once again threatening to block the sea routes. We know that the Strait of Hormuz has been in limbo for months. How far do you see, the macroeconomic spillover effect of this really affecting people?
Yes, this will have quite a devastating effect. There was relief, immense relief after the ceasefire and MOU, and oil prices were stabilizing around $70 a barrel. But now they are approaching $80. Maybe it will go beyond and cross $100 if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. And more importantly, if the Iranians were to use its influence over Houthis, who may block the el-mandeb straits linking Red Sea with the Indian Ocean, oil tankers may not be able to go even through that choke point. So you have double whammy, and oil prices may shoot immeasurably very high level. And this may cause not only high oil prices, but also inflation, and may send many countries which are already experiencing zero growth rate into recession, especially in Europe, which is already denied itself Russian oil and gas, and it is buying expensive American oil and gas and other limited sources available, because the world produces around 105 million barrels of oil, of which about 20 million barrels the United States burns every 24 hours. So there is this slight increase by OPEC plus countries, but still that is not sufficient to compensate the 20% loss from the Gulf countries, all the 7-8 countries, because Iran's supplies are also now choked by the Americans because of the blockade and sanctions which have been, the waiver which has been again put into effect as sanctions. So in that way, 8 countries' oil, almost 22.5 million barrels per day. There is a shortage from the Gulf, which used to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. This would definitely cause loss in the stock market, where people have lost crores and millions of dollars around the world. It may further lead to losses and bring about economic misery in many countries, developing countries, which have faced huge inflation. And this may lead to civil unrest, because popular governments are unable to control the high oil prices, and this may lead to political upheaval in many global South countries, and lead to worse kind of a situation.
Absolutely, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your perspective and insights with us. In more news from the Middle East, in southern Lebanon in particular, tensions have spiked following a series of aggressive military actions conducted by Israeli forces. Now, according to reports, a large-scale demolition operation was carried out at dawn in the Bint Bel district, where numerous homes and structures were destroyed using explosives in the valleys of Beit Yahun. Meanwhile, Israeli forces reportedly bulldozed primary transportation routes connecting Bint Bel to Maroun al-Ras, and armed personnel opened fire on local residents attempting to inspect orchards near Majd al-Zoun and al-Mansuri. As Israeli military operations continue, diplomatic representatives from both nations have commenced a new round of closed-door ceasefire talks at the U.S. Embassy in Rome. This meeting marks the first negotiation since a U.S. brokered framework agreement was reached in June to pave the way for a final peace accord. Discussions are currently focused on implementation of pilot zones in the south, currently under Israeli control, which are slated for transfer to the Lebanese armed forces. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar has stated that Israel is prepared to move forward with this withdrawal, although it has previously linked completion to Hezbollah's disarmament. Now, conversely, Lebanese President Michael Aoun has instructed his delegation to press for an immediate pullout, seeking tangible progress to resolve the ongoing disputes over territorial control and border security. Meanwhile, tensions continue to escalate in the Black Sea region as Russia and Ukraine exchange fresh attacks on critical maritime targets. A Russian strike on Ukraine's southern port city of Odessa has killed at least 3 people. Now, according to local officials, 3 others were injured and are being treated in the hospital. Local officials also say that Russia attacked port infrastructure in Ukraine's Odessa, Mykolaiv regions. Authorities have highlighted that residential buildings were damaged in the attack, while Russia has intensified strikes on Odessa's deep-water ports, which are vital for Ukraine's wartime economy and exports. Russia's defense ministry has confirmed carrying out the strikes, claiming that it targeted port infrastructure in Odessa and Chornomorsk using precision-guided weapons and attack drones. Moscow has stated that it hit fuel storage facilities and infrastructure allegedly used to support Ukrainian military operations, and has also claimed to have struck 4 cargo vessels in the ports of Chornomorsk and the Dnipro estuary. Amid tensions, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen arrived in Kiev for high-level defense talks. She announced plans to deepen cooperation between European and Ukrainian defense industries to boost military production and strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities. Meanwhile, Ukraine says it launched one of its largest maritime drone operations yet, and according to the commander of Kiev's unmanned systems forces, Ukrainian drones struck 20 Russian vessels overnight in the Black Sea, including 17 oil tankers, 2 gas tankers and a tugboat. The operation reportedly targeted Russia's so-called shadow fleet, which Ukraine says is used to transport oil and support Russian military logistics. Kiev now says that the campaign is aimed at disrupting fuel supplies to occupied areas, while Russia has condemned the strikes as acts of piracy and terrorism. With us on the broadcast is Dr. Satoru Nagao, fellow at the Hudson Institute, joining us live from Tokyo. Thank you so much, sir, for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX. Of course, even while the world's eyes are trained towards what's really happening in the Middle East, tensions continue to escalate even between Russia and Ukraine. Fresh barrage of attacks have been reported in the Black Sea region. Russia and Ukraine have now traded fire. Reports had initially come in with regards to a Russian strike on Ukraine's southern port city of Odessa. Now, that's one of the crucial transit point for imports and exports to and from Ukraine, and it seems that Russia is using a rather calculated move to target this particular port. What, in your assessment, are Russia's objectives with consistently striking the Odessa port in such a manner?
Well, in this case, a naval battle-related attack has happened related to the Crimea Peninsula and Odessa. Of course, Ukraine attacked the ships around the Crimea Peninsula, so now Russian Navy withdraw from this place to the more backside they are staying. And at the same time, instead of the naval ship, the drone attack is the main retaliation from Russian side to Odessa, and so that's why they are firing. Indeed, this Russia's invasion to Ukraine is facing the stalemate. Both sides cannot move the front line. But at the same time, instead of moving the front line by ground troops, they are firing the missile and the drones, and that is the main part of the battle. Ukraine's target is energy facility, and Russia lost many energy facility. At the same time, Shadow Fleet ship carrying the oil to export. These are the target. In case of the Russia attacked Ukraine's energy facility too, but especially the winter season they were aiming. In winter season, the people rely on the heater or other heating products. That's why this energy facility is the main target. But now this is not the winter, so target is different. But anyway, the Russians want to retaliate because recently the Ukraine's drone attack is very effective. That is current situation. But even if they fire each other without advancing ground troops, borderline hasn't changed so well.
Absolutely, and of course, as of now, it's still the summer months at the moment. But a lot of people are talking about how usually, as we've seen last year and the year before that, we see calibrated attacks on civilian infrastructure at large, especially during winter time, when there is a crunch of energy as well as an increase in demand. So it does not seem very likely that this conflict will be resolved soon, because Donald Trump, while yes, last year he was going gung-ho over this, we met Vladimir Putin as well, but there's been no headway because now the US is embroiled in the Middle East. Where do you think then we're likely to see the status of the particular conflict between Russia and Ukraine in the next 6 months?
Okay, both cases there is the similarities. The mediator shows a strong effort, but main fighters, main fighting countries do not have the will to end the battle. That is common in the Russia, Ukraine, or the US and Iran. In case of Russia and Ukraine, if Russia continued their battle in Ukraine, their invasion, in this case, even if President Putin's performance in Ukraine is not so effective, still they are under test and no one can check the score of the test. So that's why President Putin wants to continue this battle, because their performance in the test is not so good. And in this case, in case of Ukraine, cannot abandon the territory they lost, because Russia's invasion is bad thing and illegal. So that's why Ukraine want to claim the territories Russia have already occupied. So that's why it is not easy to end this resistance, this battle. So that's why the Ukraine side, of course, if the Russia admit and return the territory, of course they can accept, but such kind of things will not happen, the Ukraine expects. So in this case, mediator, the United States, President Trump's effort is big and shows strong will to mediate, but Russia and Ukraine do not have the will to end the battle. So that's why it hasn't happened. In case of the Middle East, the same thing has happened. Russia and Iran, US and Iran, both sides do not have the will to end the battle because they haven't achieved the goal. And so Qatar or Pakistan try to show the effort, but mediators' effort is not meaningful without a strong will to end the battle between the US, Israel, and Iran in this case.
All right, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your insights and perspective with us on NewsX World. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to further updates, in fact, breaking updates that we're tracking at the moment. An Indian national who had been reported missing after an attack on a commercial vessel off the coast of Oman has lost their life. Now, according to the Indian national's family, the victim was among 11 Indian crew members on board the GFS Galaxy, which came under attack in the Gulf waters near Oman on Sunday amid escalating tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, according to reports, the deceased father-in-law confirmed his death on Wednesday. The identity of the crew member has not yet been officially released by the Indian government. The Ministry of External Affairs has earlier stated that 10 of the 11 Indian nationals on board were rescued, while one remained missing following the attack. The Indian embassy in Oman has been closely coordinating with Omani authorities during the search and rescue operation. Now, the Ministry of External Affairs of India has strongly condemned the attack on the commercial vessel and thanked Omani authorities for their continued assistance and support. The incident, of course, comes at the backdrop of renewed hostilities in West Asia and heightened security concerns along the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the world's busiest oil shipping routes. The attack on the GFS Galaxy is among a series of recent strikes targeting commercial vessels operating in the region, with this confirmation of this Indian national's death, the number of Indian casualties in the latest phase of the West Asia conflict, which escalated from July 6th, has now risen to 2. Another Indian national was earlier reported dead after Iran allegedly struck 2 UAE-linked tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. India continues to monitor the evolving security situation in the region while maintaining close contact with local authorities to ensure the safety of Indian nationals working abroad, especially on commercial ships in Gulf waters. US President Donald Trump has paid writer E.G. Carroll more than $5 million, bringing to a close one of the most high-profile civil judgments against him. A jury found Donald Trump liable in 2023 for sexual abuse and defamation in a civil case brought by Carroll. The case stemmed from her allegation that Trump sexually assaulted her in a Manhattan department store in the mid-1990s and later defamed her by denying the claims. The jury awarded $5 million in damages, which grew to about $5.6 million after interest was added. The money had remained in escrow while Trump pursued multiple appeals. Last month, a federal judge ordered the funds to be released to Carroll's legal team despite objections from Trump's lawyer. Donald Trump continues to deny Carroll's allegations, calling the case politically motivated. However, this payment does not end the legal dispute. A separate civil judgment ordering Trump to pay Carroll more than $83 million for additional defamatory statements remains under appeal. Take a look.
I don't even know who this woman is. I have no idea who she is, where she came from. This is another scam. It's a political witch hunt. And somehow we're going to have to fight this stuff. We cannot let our country go into this abyss. This is disgraceful. You have somebody running for office. You have a woman that's financed and lied about it. She totally lied about it by Democrat operatives, like just about the biggest one there is. And she said that wasn't true. They found that she lied about it, and the judge wasn't even, I guess, letting it be put in as evidence. The whole thing is a scam.
All right, viewers, there of course we heard what Donald Trump had to say. And now we shift our focus to the world of football. Spain suffocated France deep in the heart of Texas on Tuesday, pouring into their first World Cup final since lifting the trophy in 2010 with an utterly dominant 2-0 victory that left the tournament's most feared attack gasping for air. From the opening whistle, the Spaniards wrapped themselves around France and tightening their grip with every wave of pressing and every spell of possession until the life had been squeezed from a French strike force that had looked irresistible throughout the tournament. Michael Oyarzabal and Pedro Porro supplied the goals, but the scoreline barely reflected Spain's authority as the European champions monopolized possession, dictated the tempo and denied France's wanted forward line any platform from which to attack. Spain are now within one victory of completing a World Cup European Championship double title. The European champions will face the winner of Wednesday's semi-final between England and Argentina in the final as they try to win the World Cup for a second time. For a country that waited generations for its first World Cup, a second title 16 years later would herald the arrival of another Spanish golden era, this one inspired by Lamine Yamal but driven by one of the most competitive and complete collective teams in international football. Well, viewers, that's all we have for this bulletin. Due to paucity of time, we must dip into a quick short break. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on News.